The easiest mistake a person can make is judging something before understanding its value. Natalie Grant stepped out of her black SUV and immediately regretted coming. The workshop looked worse than the photos. Faded paint peeled from the walls. One section of the roof sagged slightly above a side storage area. An old pickup truck sat near a stack of used tires. The gravel parking lot was uneven, and a hand-painted sign swayed gently in the afternoon wind. Natalie folded her arms. "This is the place?" she asked. Trevor Collins glanced around and nodded. "According to the local recommendations, yes." Natalie laughed quietly. "Our company is considering partnerships with regional service providers, and this is what people suggested." Trevor smirked. "Maybe they have low standards." The comment drew a few chuckles from the visiting executives. Natalie shook her head. "I have seen high school auto shops that looked more organized than this." None of them realized someone had heard every word. Inside the garage, Logan Mercer tightened a bolt beneath the hood of a delivery van. He heard the voices through the open service bay. Years ago, comments like that might have bothered him. Not anymore. Life had taught him that people usually revealed themselves long before they understood anyone else. He wiped his hands with a shop towel and stepped into the sunlight. Natalie noticed him immediately. He was taller than she expected. Broad shoulders, dark brown hair, calm eyes. His work shirt showed signs of a long day, but it was clean. Nothing about him suggested embarrassment. "Can I help you?" Logan asked. Natalie looked around once more. "You own this place?" "I do." "Interesting." Logan waited. Natalie gestured toward the building. "You are aware this workshop looks like it belongs in another decade, right?" Trevor laughed. One executive smiled awkwardly. Logan simply nodded. "Probably true." Natalie seemed surprised by the answer. "You are not going to defend it?" "The roof leaks when it rains hard," Logan said. "The sign needs replacing, and the parking lot has needed work for years." Trevor smirked. "At least he is honest." Logan shrugged. "No point arguing with facts." For a second, Natalie did not know how to respond. Most business owners would have launched into excuses. Others would have become defensive. Logan didn't either. The wind carried the scent of motor oil and fresh-cut grass from a nearby field. Somewhere inside the garage, a radio played softly. The moment stretched longer than expected. Then a young girl pushed open the office door and stepped outside carrying a school backpack. "Dad, are we still getting pizza tonight?" Logan smiled immediately. The change in his expression was impossible to miss. "That depends." "On what?" "Did you finish your math assignment?" The girl sighed dramatically. "Almost." Natalie watched the exchange. Something about it felt genuine. Unrehearsed. Real. Logan turned back toward the visitors. "Sorry about that." "Your daughter?" Natalie asked. "Ava." The girl waved politely before disappearing back inside. Silence settled across the parking lot. Natalie glanced at the aging workshop again, then at the man standing in front of it. The building looked worn. The equipment looked old. Yet somehow the owner seemed completely unbothered by either fact. And for reasons she could not explain, that confidence bothered her more than if he had argued. Natalie Grant expected to forget the workshop the moment she drove away. Instead, she found herself thinking about it for the rest of the afternoon. The company vehicle moved along the highway toward Pittsburgh while Trevor Collins reviewed reports from the passenger seat. Numbers filled the screen of his tablet. Projected costs, expansion plans, vendor evaluations. Natalie normally focused on every detail. Today her attention kept drifting elsewhere. "You are quiet," Trevor said. Natalie looked out the window. "Just thinking." "About the garage?" He laughed. "Please tell me we are not considering that place." Natalie did not answer immediately. She remembered Logan's reaction when she criticized the building. Or rather, his lack of reaction. Most contractors spent half their lives trying to impress potential clients. Logan had not seemed interested in impressing anyone. That bothered her more than she wanted to admit. The next afternoon, an unexpected scheduling problem forced Natalie to return to the area. A nearby supplier requested an emergency meeting, and the location happened to be less than 10 minutes from Logan's workshop. By the time the meeting ended, heavy clouds covered the sky. Rain began falling steadily across the rural roads. Natalie glanced at the clock. School dismissal had already happened. Without fully understanding why, she turned her vehicle toward the workshop. When she arrived, she did not go inside immediately. Through the office window, she saw Ava sitting at a small desk doing homework. Colored pencils, notebooks, and textbooks covered the surface. Logan sat nearby reviewing repair invoices while occasionally helping her solve math problems. The scene felt surprisingly peaceful. Natalie remained outside for several seconds watching through the glass. There were no expensive furnishings, no luxury, no appearance of success. Yet the room contained something she rarely encountered: contentment. Eventually she stepped inside. A bell above the door chimed softly. Ava looked up first. "Hi." Natalie smiled politely. "Hello." Logan stood from his chair. "Back already?" "Business nearby." His expression suggested he was not entirely convinced. Ava closed her notebook. "Dad says if I get an A on my test tomorrow, we can celebrate with extra cheese pizza." "You negotiated that?" Natalie asked. Ava grinned. "I am very persuasive." Logan laughed quietly. "That is one way to describe it." Rain tapped gently against the windows. The office smelled faintly of coffee and motor oil. Everything felt ordinary. Yet somehow Natalie found herself staying longer than intended. Customers came and went. One elderly farmer arrived with a broken tractor part. Logan repaired it without charging labor. A young mother stopped by because her vehicle was making an unusual noise. Logan checked it and reassured her that the issue was minor. Every interaction followed the same pattern: respect, patience, honesty. Nobody seemed afraid of him. Nobody appeared intimidated. More surprisingly, nobody questioned his word. "You know all these people?" Natalie finally asked. Logan looked around the shop. "Most of them. They trust you." "Trust takes time." He returned a repaired part to a customer. "Usually longer than people think." Natalie watched him for a moment. The worn workshop still looked exactly the same as before. The roof still sagged. The sign still leaned slightly in the wind outside. Yet for the first time, she started wondering whether she had been looking at the wrong thing all along. Because while the building appeared broken, the man inside it seemed to be holding an entire community together. Over the next 2 weeks, Natalie found more reasons than she cared to admit to visit the small town outside Pittsburgh. Officially, she was reviewing potential regional service partners for Grand Industrial Systems. Unofficially, she kept returning to Logan Mercer's workshop. Each visit revealed something new. None of it matched her first impression. One chilly morning, she arrived just before 8 o'clock. The parking lot was already busy. Pickup trucks, delivery vans, farm vehicles, and family sedans filled nearly every available space. Inside, the workshop hummed with activity. Engines ran. Tools clicked against metal. Customers moved in and out of the office. Logan seemed to be everywhere at once. He inspected a transmission issue for one customer, answered questions from another, and helped an elderly man carry supplies to his truck without missing a step. Yet despite the constant movement, nothing felt rushed. "How many people work here?" Natalie asked while watching from the office doorway. "4," Logan replied. "Including me." Natalie looked around in disbelief. "This many vehicles with 4 people?" Logan smiled slightly. "People are patient when they know you are honest." Before she could respond, a local business owner entered carrying a box. "Logan, I brought those parts you needed." "You did not have to do that." "Sure I did." The man laughed. "You kept my delivery trucks running all winter." Similar conversations repeated throughout the morning. One customer dropped off homemade cookies. Another brought fresh coffee. Someone else offered tickets to a local baseball game. None of it appeared transactional. It felt personal. The community trusted Logan in a way Natalie rarely saw in business. Later that afternoon, she noticed something else. A young mechanic accidentally installed the wrong component on a repair job. The mistake could have delayed the project by several hours. The employee immediately looked embarrassed. "I am sorry. I should have checked the part number twice." Logan examined the situation. "Then check it 3 times next time." The mechanic nodded. "You are not angry." Logan handed him the correct component. "Getting angry will not fix the vehicle." The employee laughed nervously. "Fair point." Natalie watched the exchange carefully. In her corporate offices, mistakes often triggered lengthy meetings and uncomfortable conversations. Here, Logan focused on solutions instead of blame. The difference was impossible to ignore. As the day continued, Ava returned from school and settled behind the office desk with homework. She greeted customers by name. Several greeted her back. One elderly customer handed her a small bag of candy. "For acing your science test." Ava grinned. "Thanks, Mr. Harris." Natalie smiled despite herself. The workshop felt less like a business and more like a second home for half the town. As sunset painted the sky orange and gold, Natalie stepped outside for fresh air. The old building stood exactly as it always had. The roof still needed repairs. The paint still peeled from the walls. The sign still leaned slightly toward the road. Yet now she saw something she had completely missed during her first visit. The workshop was not successful because of the building. It was successful because of the man inside it. At that moment, Trevor's voice interrupted her thoughts from behind. I still do not understand why you keep coming back here. Natalie looked through the open garage door where Logan was helping a customer start a repaired engine. Maybe, she said quietly, because everyone else keeps coming back too. And for the first time since she had arrived in town, she found herself genuinely wanting to understand why. 1 month after her first visit, a problem landed on Natalie Grant's desk that quickly spread through every level of Grant Industrial Systems. One of the company's largest manufacturing facilities was experiencing repeated equipment failures. Production delays were mounting. Deadlines were slipping. Every hour cost money. Engineers examined the issue. Consultants reviewed reports. Specialists proposed complicated solutions that carried enormous price tags. Yet nothing seemed to work. Natalie spent 3 consecutive days in meetings listening to experts disagree with one another. By Thursday afternoon, frustration filled the executive conference room. Charts covered the screens. Technical reports sat stacked across the table. Trevor Collins stood near the front of the room, delivering another presentation. The safest option is a complete replacement of the system, he said confidently. It will be expensive, but we cannot afford further delays. Several executives nodded. Natalie studied the numbers without enthusiasm. Something felt wrong. The recommendations kept growing more expensive while the actual problem remained unsolved. Later that evening, exhausted and unable to focus, she found herself driving toward the small town again. The autumn sun was beginning to set when she pulled into Logan's parking lot. The familiar workshop looked exactly as it always did. Inside, the sound of tools echoed softly. Logan was working on an engine while Ava completed homework nearby. Long day? Logan asked without looking up. Natalie laughed quietly. That obvious? You have the same expression customers get right before they tell me about a problem nobody can fix. She leaned against a workbench. Maybe that is exactly why I am here. Logan listened as she explained the situation. She described the manufacturing equipment, the repeated failures, and the endless meetings. Logan asked surprisingly few questions. Most were simple. When did the failures start? Did anything change before they appeared? What happens immediately before the shutdowns? Natalie answered each one. After several minutes, Logan wiped his hands and thought silently. The garage became unusually quiet. Even Ava looked up from her homework. Finally, Logan spoke. Everybody is looking at the breakdown. Of course. Maybe they should look at what happened right before it. Natalie frowned slightly. What do you mean? Logan pointed toward an engine sitting nearby. Most people focus on where the problem appears. He tapped a metal component. The real cause is often somewhere else. Natalie stared at him. Such a simple observation. Yet none of the expensive consultants had approached the situation that way. You think we are looking in the wrong place? Logan shrugged. I think you have a lot of smart people studying the symptom. He returned to work. Maybe someone should study the trigger. The conversation lasted less than 20 minutes. Yet during the drive home, Natalie could not stop replaying it. The next morning, she instructed her engineering team to review the events immediately preceding each failure rather than the failures themselves. By noon, they discovered a pattern no one had noticed. A minor calibration sequence had been creating a chain reaction throughout the system. The actual repair was surprisingly simple. Standing inside headquarters later that day, Natalie looked out across the city skyline. For the second time, a man working from a worn-out garage had seen something an entire room full of experts had missed. And for the first time, she began wondering whether his value extended far beyond anything she had originally imagined. The discovery changed more than the outcome of a single problem. It changed the way Natalie Grant looked at Logan Mercer. For weeks afterward, she found herself comparing his approach to the people around her. The difference was impossible to ignore. While consultants relied on complicated presentations, Logan focused on understanding causes. While executives fought for credit, Logan concentrated on solutions. Most surprising of all, he never seemed interested in proving he was right. One crisp autumn morning, Natalie arrived at headquarters to find another challenge waiting. A major distribution center owned by Grant Industrial Systems had reported recurring equipment interruptions. The issue was smaller than the previous crisis, but still costly. Before the engineering department could schedule another round of meetings, Natalie made an unusual decision. She drove directly to the workshop. When she arrived, Logan was helping Ava load supplies for a school project into the back of an old pickup truck. "You are becoming a regular customer," he said with a faint smile. Natalie laughed. "I am beginning to notice that." Ava climbed into the truck and waved. "Good luck with your work problem." Natalie blinked. "How did you know I had one?" "You only show up unexpectedly when something is broken." Logan chuckled while Ava grinned proudly at her observation. After Ava left with a teacher heading toward a school event, Natalie explained the latest situation. Once again, Logan listened carefully. This time, however, he asked for detailed maintenance logs. Natalie pulled the files up on her tablet. For nearly 20 minutes, he studied the records. The office remained quiet except for the ticking of a wall clock and the distant sound of tools inside the garage. Finally, he pointed toward a series of entries. "There." Natalie leaned closer. "What am I looking at?" "Everybody keeps replacing components after the interruptions. Because they fail." Logan nodded. "But nobody is asking why they fail in the same sequence." Natalie studied the reports. "You think they are connected?" "I think something upstream is creating the pattern." The phrase immediately reminded her of the previous problem. Upstream. Cause before symptom. Trigger before failure. By the end of the day, her engineers confirmed Logan's observation. A simple maintenance scheduling conflict had been placing excessive strain on multiple systems. Correcting the schedule solved the issue almost immediately. The following week, Natalie invited Logan to visit headquarters as an informal consultant during a strategy review. The reaction was exactly what she expected. Trevor Collins objected before the meeting invitation was even finalized. "You cannot be serious." Natalie looked up from her desk. "Why?" "Because he owns a garage." "And?" Trevor frowned. "We have engineers, analysts, advisors." Natalie remained calm. "And yet he has solved 2 problems they missed." Trevor had no answer. 2 days later, Logan walked through the headquarters lobby. Wearing a clean work shirt and dark jacket, employees glanced curiously in his direction. Some assumed he was there to repair something. Others barely noticed him. Natalie met him near the elevators. "Thank you for coming." Logan looked around the towering building of glass and steel. "I still think you have too many conference rooms." Natalie laughed. The sound surprised even her. As they walked toward the executive floor, she realized something important. Weeks earlier, she had seen a broken workshop and assumed she understood its owner. Now she trusted his judgment enough to bring him into the center of her company. And that trust was growing faster than either of them realized. The executive strategy meeting began at 9 o'clock sharp. Department heads filled the conference room. Financial analysts arranged reports across the table. Engineering managers reviewed technical projections on large screens mounted along the walls. Logan Mercer sat near the far end of the room, wearing the same clean work shirt he would have worn inside his workshop. The contrast between him and the executives surrounding him could not have been greater. Expensive suits, polished presentations, corporate titles. Yet Logan appeared completely comfortable. Natalie Grant noticed it immediately. Most visitors became nervous inside headquarters. Logan simply observed. Trevor Collins noticed as well. Unlike Natalie, he found it irritating. "Before we begin," Trevor said, "I would like clarification regarding why an outside mechanic is attending an executive planning session." Several people shifted uncomfortably. Natalie remained calm. "Because he has earned the invitation." Trevor folded his arms. "Based on what qualifications?" Logan looked down at the documents in front of him and said nothing. Natalie answered instead. "Based on results." The room fell quiet. Trevor clearly wanted to continue arguing, but the meeting moved forward. For the next hour, teams presented operational forecasts and infrastructure plans. Logan listened carefully. Occasionally, he asked simple questions. Most seemed almost too simple. Yet each one forced people to think differently. Why are these maintenance costs increasing if equipment failures are decreasing? Why are 2 departments tracking the same data differently? What changed before those numbers started moving? The questions were not complicated. The answers often were. By lunchtime, several managers had filled pages of notes. Natalie watched with growing satisfaction. Logan never tried to sound intelligent. He simply focused on understanding the problem. Later that afternoon, the group toured one of the company's largest production facilities. Machines stretched across thousands of square feet. Conveyor systems moved continuously. Supervisors monitored operations from elevated platforms. The facility manager proudly explained recent upgrades. Logan listened politely. Then he paused beside one section of equipment. How often does this system stop unexpectedly? The manager looked surprised. A few times each month. Only this section? Mostly. Logan nodded thoughtfully. Interesting. Trevor sighed loudly. Please do not tell me we have another mystery for him to solve. Several people laughed. Logan ignored the comment entirely. Instead, he continued walking through the facility. Natalie noticed something important. Every time Trevor mocked him, Logan refused to participate. No defensiveness. No resentment. No need to win. The confidence came from somewhere deeper. As the tour ended, employees began leaving for the evening. Natalie and Logan remained behind near an observation window overlooking the production floor. Below them, workers completed final inspections before the night shift arrived. You handled today well, Natalie said. Logan smiled faintly. I mostly asked questions. Good questions. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence. The setting sun cast long shadows across the facility. Machines hummed softly in the distance. Can I ask you something? Natalie said. Sure. Why do you never seem interested in proving people wrong? Logan considered the question carefully. Because most people eventually tell themselves the truth. Natalie looked at him. And if they do not? Logan glanced across the production floor. Then proving them wrong does not really change anything. The answer stayed with her long after the conversation ended. Driving home that evening, Natalie realized her trust in Logan was no longer based on a few good observations or clever solutions. It was based on character. And for the first time since taking over the company, she found herself trusting one man from a broken workshop more than many people inside her own executive offices. As autumn gave way to early winter, Logan's presence around Grant Industrial Systems became impossible to ignore. He was never officially hired. He never asked for a title. Yet more departments began seeking his opinion whenever complicated problems appeared. Some executives appreciated it. Others did not. None were more frustrated than Trevor Collins. Every solution Logan helped uncover seemed to weaken Trevor's influence a little more. The tension finally reached a breaking point during the company's annual leadership conference. Executives, managers, investors, and regional partners gathered inside a luxury hotel outside Philadelphia. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the ballroom. Large projection screens displayed company achievements. Waiters moved quietly between tables. Natalie sat near the front beside senior leadership. Logan had only attended because Natalie personally invited him to participate in a panel discussion about operational efficiency. The decision immediately became the subject of whispered conversations. Why is he here? One executive asked. He owns a repair shop. Another shrugged. Apparently the CEO trusts him. Trevor overheard the comments and smiled. The evening program progressed smoothly until the discussion panel began. Several executives shared prepared remarks. Industry trends were discussed. Growth projections were reviewed. Then Logan was asked a simple question about problem solving. What is the most important lesson you have learned running a business? The moderator asked. Logan considered the question. Listen before assuming. A few people nodded. Others seemed underwhelmed. Trevor saw an opportunity. He stepped toward a microphone positioned near the audience. That is interesting advice, he said. Although running a small-town garage and leading a national corporation are not exactly the same thing. A few nervous laughs drifted through the ballroom. Logan remained calm. No, they are not. Trevor continued. Then perhaps we should remember that some experiences translate better than others. More laughter followed. Natalie immediately recognized what he was doing. The room did too. Trevor was not asking questions. He was trying to embarrass Logan publicly. For example, Trevor said with a smile, if one of my facilities had a leaking roof and a broken parking lot, I would probably fix those things before offering business advice. Several people looked away. The comment landed exactly where Trevor intended. Logan could have defended himself. He could have explained how every dollar he saved went toward raising Ava and keeping his employees working. He could have reminded everyone how many company problems he had helped solve. Instead, he simply nodded. That is fair. Trevor looked surprised. That is all. Logan smiled faintly. A building can always be repaired. The ballroom grew quieter. Logan glanced around the room. Character is harder. Silence followed. Not dramatic silence. Honest silence. The kind that appears when people suddenly realize they have been listening to the wrong person. Trevor opened his mouth to respond, but found no words. Natalie watched the room carefully. Investors who had been laughing moments earlier now looked thoughtful. Managers exchanged glances. Even the moderator seemed uncertain how to continue. Logan never added another sentence. He simply thanked the panel and returned to his seat. As applause slowly filled the ballroom, Natalie realized something remarkable. Trevor had tried to make Logan look small. Instead, he had revealed exactly who each of them truly was. 2 weeks after the leadership conference, the largest operational crisis in Grant Industrial Systems history arrived without warning. Early on a Monday morning, multiple regional facilities began reporting the same problem. Critical production systems were experiencing synchronized disruptions. Orders were delayed. Shipping schedules were threatened. Clients demanded answers. By noon, emergency meetings filled every conference room at headquarters. Analysts reviewed data. Engineers compared reports. Department heads exchanged theories. Yet no one could explain why facilities hundreds of miles apart were suddenly experiencing nearly identical failures. Natalie Grant stood at the head of the executive boardroom, watching anxiety spread across the room. Financial projections flashed across large screens. Every update seemed worse than the last. Trevor Collins immediately stepped forward with recommendations. We need emergency replacement protocols. He pointed toward a presentation. If we move quickly, we can contain the damage. Several executives nodded. The proposal would cost millions of dollars. Natalie studied the numbers carefully. Something felt familiar. The solution seemed enormous. The explanation felt incomplete. Then she made a decision that surprised no one more than herself. Call Logan. 30 minutes later, Logan Mercer walked into headquarters carrying nothing more than a notebook and a cup of coffee. Some executives looked relieved. Others looked skeptical. Trevor looked irritated. This is not a garage problem, he said. Logan ignored the comment and reviewed the reports. The room gradually grew quieter. For nearly 20 minutes, he asked simple questions. When was the first interruption reported? Which facility noticed it first? What changed before the disruption started? The answers slowly revealed a pattern. Logan stood and approached one of the screens. Everybody is looking at the failures. Several executives exchanged glances. They had heard that sentence before. Logan pointed toward a timeline. The failures are not connected. Trevor frowned. Of course they are connected. Logan shook his head. The response is connected. The room fell silent. Natalie watched carefully. Logan highlighted a sequence of software updates implemented across multiple facilities several days earlier. The updates themselves were not causing problems. The monitoring system reacting to those updates was. One incorrect automated response was creating a chain reaction throughout the network. The actual equipment remained functional. The system protecting it had become the problem. Engineers immediately began reviewing the data. One after another, they reached the same conclusion. Logan was right. Again, the boardroom grew very still. No one laughed. No one questioned him. For the next several hours, teams worked to implement corrective adjustments. By evening, facilities across the country began returning to normal operations. The crisis that had threatened millions of dollars in losses started disappearing almost as quickly as it had appeared. As reports of recovery arrived, the atmosphere inside headquarters changed completely. Relief replaced panic. Confidence returned. Executives congratulated one another. Analysts revised projections. Yet the most remarkable moment came shortly before sunset. The chief operations officer looked across the boardroom and said quietly, "We would not have found this today." No one disagreed. Trevor remained silent. For once, he had nothing to say. Natalie looked toward Logan. He was already gathering his notebook. No celebration. No demand for recognition. No speech. Just quiet preparation to leave. The room watched him stand. A mechanic from a small workshop had once again solved the problem that experts could not. And as the evening sun cast golden light through the glass walls of the boardroom, a deep silence settled across the room. It was the silence that appears when the truth becomes impossible to ignore. 6 months later, winter settled gently across western Pennsylvania. Snow rested along rooftops and fence lines. The small workshop outside town looked much the same as it always had. The sign still leaned slightly toward the road. The building still carried the marks of years of honest work. Yet something important had changed. People no longer saw it as a broken garage. They saw it as Logan Mercer's workshop. And that meant something. Customers continued arriving before sunrise. Local business owners still trusted his advice. Families still brought their vehicles to him without hesitation. Inside the office, Ava sat at her desk working on a school project while snow drifted softly beyond the windows. "Dad," she said, looking up from her notebook, "do you think successful people are always rich?" Logan smiled. "Depends how you define successful." Ava thought about that for a moment. "I think you are successful." Logan laughed quietly. "That is because you are biased." "No," she shook her head firmly. "It is because everybody comes to you when they need help." Before Logan could answer, the bell above the office door chimed. He looked up and froze slightly. Natalie Grant stepped inside. A white winter coat covered her shoulders. Snowflakes rested in her chestnut hair. She smiled when she saw Ava. "Good afternoon." Ava grinned. "Hi, Natalie." Over the past several months, the visits had become more frequent. Sometimes business brought Natalie to town. Sometimes it did not. Yet she always seemed to find her way back to the workshop. "I hope I am not interrupting," Natalie said. "Only algebra," Ava replied dramatically. "Then I apologize for nothing." Everyone laughed. Later that afternoon, Ava left for a school event with friends, leaving Logan and Natalie alone in the office. Outside, the winter sky glowed pale gold as the sun began to set. For a while they simply talked. Not about corporate problems. Not about equipment failures. Just life. Family. Goals. Ordinary things. The conversation felt easy. Familiar. Comfortable. Eventually, Natalie glanced around the room. "You know, the first time I came here, I thought this place was falling apart." Logan smiled. "You were not entirely wrong." She laughed softly. "I remember making fun of the roof." "You definitely made fun of the roof." "And the sign." "Also true." Natalie shook her head. "I was looking at the wrong things." Silence settled briefly between them. Through the window, snow drifted across the parking lot. The workshop lights reflected warmly against the glass. "I spent years trusting resumes," Natalie said quietly. "Titles. Presentations. Appearances." She looked directly at him. "Then I met someone who never tried to impress me." Logan said nothing. He rarely did when something mattered. Natalie smiled. "You became the person I trusted most." The words lingered in the quiet room. Honest. Simple. Real. Logan looked down for a moment before meeting her eyes again. There was no need for a speech. No need for grand declarations. Everything important had already happened through months of observation, respect, and understanding. Outside, the snow continued falling. Inside, the old workshop felt warmer than ever. Natalie glanced around the room one last time. The worn walls. The old desk. The familiar smell of coffee and engine oil. It was the same place she had once judged without understanding. Yet somehow it had become her favorite place in the world. And as the evening settled gently over the town, both of them sat together in peaceful silence, knowing that sometimes the people worth trusting most are the ones the world overlooks first.